Monica wiped her hands on her apron as she hurried from one table to the next. It was a slow afternoon at Bradley's Diner, the kind of place that hadn't updated its decor since the 80s but somehow still attracted a steady stream of regulars. The small bell above the door jingled occasionally, but it wasn't busy enough to distract her from the man sitting outside, leaning against the diner's window. He looked exhausted, his clothes rumpled and his shoes barely holding together. The man, probably in his mid-50s, had a face that told 1,000 stories of hardship, lines etched deep into his dark skin, his eyes distant but alert. Monica had seen him before, always sitting a few blocks away with a sign that read, "Hungry, anything helps." She had never spoken to him, but something about today made her stop mid-step and stare longer than usual. "Monica!" barked Mr. Bradley from behind the counter, snapping her out of her thoughts. "Focus. We don't pay you to stand around." She bit her tongue, resisting the urge to snap back. It was always like this with Mr. Bradley, short-tempered and condescending, especially toward her. At 27, Monica had learned to pick her battles, and this wasn't worth it. By the time the lunch rush had passed and the diner was nearly empty, she noticed the man hadn't moved. He was still sitting outside, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular. Monica glanced at the clock. She had a 10-minute break before her next shift started. Without thinking too much about it, she grabbed the plate of leftovers from a canceled order and walked outside. "Hey," she said softly, crouching down in front of him. "You hungry?" The man's eyes flickered with surprise, as if he wasn't used to being spoken to directly. He nodded cautiously. Monica placed the plate on the ground in front of him. "It's not much, but it's hot," she said, giving him a small smile. "What's your name?" "James," he said after a moment, his voice hoarse. "Thank you. I mean it." "Don't mention it," Monica replied. "Everyone deserves a warm meal." As James began eating, Monica sat beside him, her back against the wall of the diner. The air smelled faintly of grease and coffee, but she barely noticed. "You live around here?" she asked. James hesitated, then chuckled bitterly. "If you can call it living. Mostly I moved from shelter to shelter. Been on the streets for a few years now." Monica didn't push for details. She could tell it wasn't an easy story to tell. "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm usually stuck in here," she said, gesturing toward the diner. For the first time, James smiled, a small, weary expression that barely reached his eyes. "You've got a kind heart," he said. Before Monica could respond, the door behind her slammed open. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Monica?" Mr. Bradley's voice was sharp enough to cut through the quiet afternoon. He stood with his hands on his hips, his face red with anger. Monica stood up quickly, her heart sinking. "I was just feeding a bum on my property." Mr. Bradley cut her off, his tone dripping with disgust. "Do you have any idea how bad this makes us look? People don't want to come to a place where beggars are hanging around." "He's not hurting anyone," Monica shot back, unable to keep the anger out of her voice. "He's just trying to survive." Mr. Bradley took a step closer, his jaw tightening. "You don't get to make that call. I'm the boss here, and if you can't follow the rules, then maybe you don't belong here." Monica stared at him, stunned. "You're firing me? For showing a little compassion? Consider this your last shift," he said coldly before turning on his heel and slamming the door behind him. Monica stood frozen for a moment, her mind racing. She felt a hand on her arm and turned to see James looking up at her, his expression filled with guilt. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "It's not your fault," Monica replied, forcing a smile despite the lump in her throat. "Some things just aren't fair." As she helped James gather the plate and utensils, Monica couldn't help but feel a surge of determination rise within her. She might have lost her job, but she wasn't going to lose her humanity. "I'll be fine," she told James. "And so will you. We'll figure this out." James nodded, though his eyes remained heavy with doubt. As Monica walked away from the diner for the last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something bigger. Something she couldn't yet see, but knew she had to face head-on. The evening sun dipped lower as Monica trudged home, her apron folded under her arm. Her footsteps felt heavy, not because of the long shift, but because of what had just happened. She replayed the scene in her head, Mr. Bradley's sharp voice, his utter lack of compassion, and the way he dismissed her like she was nothing. Her tiny one-bedroom apartment wasn't far from the diner. It wasn't much, just a creaky couch, a secondhand TV, and a table that wobbled if you leaned on it wrong. But it was hers, and for now, it was enough. She tossed her apron on the counter, slumped onto the couch, and let out a long, shaky breath. She wasn't naive. She knew Mr. Bradley had always treated her differently. The way his eyes narrowed when she spoke up, or how he constantly reminded her she was just a waitress. But she never thought he'd actually fire her over something as simple as feeding someone in need. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was her best friend, Rachel. "Hey girl, you okay? You sound tired," Rachel said when Monica picked up. Monica hesitated, then sighed. "I got fired." "What?" Rachel's voice shot up an octave. "What happened? Was it that jerk Bradley?" Monica explained the situation, her voice wavering slightly as she recounted the moment she stood up to her boss. Rachel listened silently, and when Monica finished, there was a pause. "Monica, you did the right thing," Rachel said firmly. "Don't let that racist piece of trash make you feel otherwise." "Yeah, well, doing the right thing doesn't pay the rent," Monica replied with a bitter laugh. Rachel's tone softened. "You'll figure it out. You always do. And if you need help, you know I've got your back." "Thanks, Rach," Monica said, feeling a small spark of hope. After hanging up, she leaned back on the couch, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. She knew Rachel meant well, but the reality of her situation was grim. No job meant no paycheck, and no paycheck meant no way to cover next month's rent. Her thoughts drifted back to James. Despite her own problems, she couldn't stop worrying about him. Was he okay? Did he have somewhere to sleep tonight? The memory of his tired eyes and grateful smile tugged at her heart. The next morning, Monica woke up early, her mind already racing with plans. She spent hours online, scouring job boards and sending out applications. Between emails, she couldn't help but wonder if James had eaten since yesterday. By noon, she decided to take a walk. The fresh air might help clear her mind, and maybe, just maybe, she'd run into James again. She stopped by a small grocery store, spending the last of her tips on a sandwich, some fruit, and a bottle of water. It didn't take long to find him. James was sitting on the same bench near the diner, his posture slouched and his eyes closed, as if the weight of the world had finally caught up with him. "Hey, James," Monica said softly, holding out the bag of food. He opened his eyes and blinked in surprise. "You didn't have to do that," he said, though he accepted the bag gratefully. "I wanted to," Monica replied, sitting down beside him. James took a bite of the sandwich, chewing slowly. "What about your job?" he asked after a moment. Monica shook her head. "It's gone. But don't worry about me. I'll figure something out." James frowned, his expression a mix of guilt and gratitude. "I'm sorry you lost your job because of me." "Don't apologize," Monica said quickly. "If anything, I'm glad I stood up for what was right. People like Bradley, they don't understand what it's like to struggle, to not know where your next meal is coming from. But I do. And if I can help someone else, I will." James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're a good person, Monica. Not many people would do what you did." She smiled, though her eyes were tinged with sadness. "I just wish the world wasn't so harsh." The two sat in silence for a while, the noise of the city humming around them. Before leaving, Monica gave James her phone number. "If you ever need anything, call me," she said. James nodded. clutching the slip of paper like it was a lifeline. As Monica walked away, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear for her own future, anger at the injustice she'd faced, but also a flicker of hope. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't let the world's cruelty snuff out her kindness. What she didn't realize was that this small act of compassion had set something in motion, something that would change both their lives forever. The next few days passed in a blur for Monica. She threw herself into job hunting, sending out resumes, attending interviews, and following up on leads. But rejection after rejection chipped away at her confidence. Every time she walked into an interview, she couldn't shake the feeling that people saw her as less than, even before she spoke a word. Bills were piling up, and the looming threat of eviction hung over her like a storm cloud. Despite her struggles, Monica couldn't bring herself to regret what she'd done. Feeding James had felt right, like a small act of rebellion against a world that often seemed devoid of kindness. It was during one of these relentless days of job searching that Monica's phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Hi, it's James. I hope this is still Monica's number. Just wanted to thank you again for the food and check-in. Monica smiled, her heart lifting slightly. She quickly typed back, Hey, James. Yes, it's me. How are you holding up? A few moments later, his reply came. Still out here, but your kindness helped more than you know. Can I ask for a favor? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of her hesitated. Her own life was barely holding together, but she couldn't ignore him. Of course. What do you need? The next message surprised her. Would you meet me at the community center on Pine Street? There's something I want to show you. Curious, Monica agreed, and later that afternoon, she found herself walking toward the small brick building on the edge of the neighborhood. The community center was modest but welcoming, with colorful murals on the walls and a steady flow of people coming and going. James was waiting for her outside. He looked a little better, cleaner, with a spark of determination in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Thanks for coming, he said, leading her inside. The interior of the center buzzed with activity. A group of kids played basketball in the gym, while in another room, volunteers handed out warm meals to those in need. This place saved my life once, James explained as they walked. When I first hit rock bottom, they helped me get back on my feet. I used to volunteer here before everything fell apart. He stopped in front of a bulletin board plastered with flyers and notices. One in particular caught Monica's eye. It advertised a job fair happening at the center in 2 days. I thought maybe this could help you, James said, gesturing to the flyer. Monica stared at it, her emotions swirling. Here she was, barely holding it together, and James, who had so little, was thinking about how to help her. James, you didn't have to, she began, but he cut her off. You helped me when you didn't have to, he said firmly. Let me do the same for you. She smiled, touched by his gesture. Thank you. I'll definitely check it out. For the first time in days, Monica felt a spark of hope. Maybe this was the break she needed. Over the next 2 days, Monica prepared for the job fair with more determination than she'd felt in weeks. She updated her resume, rehearsed her answers to potential questions, and even borrowed a blazer from Rachel to look more professional. When the day of the fair arrived, Monica walked into the community center with her head held high. The gym had been transformed into a bustling space filled with tables, recruiters, and hopeful applicants. Monica moved from table to table, handing out resumes and speaking with employers. She didn't know what would come of it, but she was proud of herself for showing up and trying. As she was about to leave, a man approached her. He was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a friendly smile. Hi, I'm Mr. Carter, he said, extending his hand. I run a catering business, and we're looking for someone with experience in customer service. Your resume caught my eye. Monica's heart skipped a beat. Really? I'd love to hear more about the position. They talked for several minutes, and by the end of the conversation, Mr. Carter handed her his card. "Give me a call on Monday," he said. "I think you'd be a great fit for our team." Monica left the fair with a lighter step, clutching the business card like it was a golden ticket. For the first time in weeks, she felt like things were starting to turn around. When she got home, she texted James. "Thank you for telling me about the job fair. I think I might have found something." His reply came quickly. "That's amazing. I knew you could do it." Monica smiled, her chest swelling with gratitude. She still had a long way to go, but for the first time in a while, she felt like she wasn't facing her struggles alone. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would change both her and James's lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The following Monday, Monica dialed the number on Mr. Carter's business card with a mix of excitement and nerves. After a few rings, his warm voice came through the line. "Monica, I was hoping to hear from you. Are you free to come in for an interview this afternoon?" "Yes, absolutely," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. "Great. Our office is on 8th Avenue. I'll see you at 2 p.m., he said. After hanging up, Monica threw herself into getting ready. She ironed her borrowed blazer, carefully styled her hair, and applied just enough makeup to feel confident. When she arrived at the catering company's office, a modest but bustling space, she felt a mix of hope and trepidation. Mr. Carter greeted her warmly and led her into a small meeting room. The interview began with the usual questions about her experience, her strengths, and how she handled challenging situations. Monica spoke candidly about her time as a waitress, emphasizing her ability to stay calm under pressure and connect with customers. She hesitated for a moment before adding, "I believe in treating everyone with kindness and respect, no matter their circumstances. It's a principle I've always tried to live by." Mr. Carter nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's a quality I value in my team. Our business isn't just about food. It's about creating a welcoming environment for everyone we serve." By the end of the interview, Monica felt cautiously optimistic. Mr. Carter stood and shook her hand. "I think you'd be a great fit, Monica. Let me talk to the team, and I'll get back to you in a couple of days." As she left the office, Monica felt a flicker of hope reignite. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was more progress than she'd had in weeks. That evening, Monica decided to stop by the community center to thank James in person. When she arrived, she found him helping a group of volunteers serve dinner in the kitchen. "You look like you've got good news," he said, smiling as she approached. "I think I might have a new job," she said, her excitement bubbling over. "That's incredible. I'm so happy for you," James said, his genuine joy lifting her spirits even higher. She helped him finish serving meals, enjoying the sense of purpose and camaraderie that filled the room. As the evening wound down, James pulled her aside. "There's something I've been thinking about," he began, his tone serious. "I want to get back on my feet, but I can't do it alone. I was wondering if you'd be willing to help me figure out the next steps. Maybe I could start volunteering here regularly, or even look for a part-time job." Monica was taken aback by his vulnerability, but she quickly nodded. "Of course. You've already helped me so much. It's the least I can do." The next few days were a whirlwind. Monica checked her phone constantly, waiting for Mr. Carter's call. Meanwhile, she and James began mapping out a plan for him. They visited thrift stores to find clothes suitable for interviews and updated his resume at the library. On Wednesday afternoon, her phone finally buzzed with the call she'd been waiting for. "Monica, it's Mr. Carter," his voice cheerful. "We'd love to have you join our team. Can you start next Monday?" Relief and gratitude flooded her. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much." After hanging up, she immediately called James to share the news. "I knew it," he exclaimed. "You deserve this, Monica. You've been such a big part of this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Now it's your turn. We're going to get you back on track, too." When Monica showed up for her first day at the catering company, She was determined to make a strong impression. The work was demanding, but fulfilling, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she was reclaiming control over her life. As she settled in her new role, she couldn't stop thinking about James and how much he'd done for her. Inspired by his resilience, Monica began talking to Mr. Carter about ways the company could give back to the community. "We could partner with the community center," she suggested one day. "They do so much good work, but they're always in need of resources." Mr. Carter listened intently, nodding. "I like the sound of that. Let's look into it." The idea took root, and soon, Monica found herself spearheading a new initiative to provide meals for the community center's programs. It was a small step, but it felt like a way to pay forward the kindness she'd received. As the weeks passed, Monica and James became a source of encouragement for each other. James began volunteering regularly at the center, rebuilding his confidence and making connections. One day, he surprised Monica with news of his own. "I got a job offer," he said, beaming. "It's part-time, but it's a start. The center connected me with a local warehouse that's hiring." Monica hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with pride. "That's amazing, James. I knew you could do it." Their lives were far from perfect, but together, they had begun to rewrite their stories. Little did they know, their efforts were about to spark a chain of events that would bring their community together in ways neither of them could have imagined. Monica's days at the catering company quickly became a blend of hard work and purpose. While she spent her mornings preparing for events and her afternoons coordinating deliveries, her evenings were often dedicated to the community center. Between organizing meals with Mr. Carter's support and mentoring James as he adjusted to his new job, Monica felt a renewed sense of belonging. The partnership with the community center blossomed faster than she'd anticipated. Mr. Carter, inspired by Monica's passion, allowed her to oversee a project where leftover food from events was packaged and donated to those in need. With her leadership, the catering company's employees began volunteering to help distribute meals. The impact was immediate. Families who frequented the center began relying on the regular food donations, and the gesture created a ripple effect of goodwill in the community. Word spread quickly, and Monica became a quiet hero in her neighborhood. One Friday afternoon, Monica was wrapping up a particularly hectic day when Mr. Carter approached her. "Monica," he began, "I've been thinking about the work you've done with the community center. It's been incredible, and I'd like to do more. Would you be interested in leading a formal outreach program?" Monica blinked, taken aback. "Me? Let it? You're already doing it, and you're doing it well," he said with a smile. "I trust you. Let's make it official." Her mind raced. It was an opportunity she couldn't have imagined just weeks ago. "I'd love to," she said, her voice steady despite her disbelief. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and brainstorming. Monica's vision for the outreach program was ambitious. Monthly food drives, partnerships with local businesses, and skills workshops at the community center. She spent hours working with Mr. Carter and other employees to outline the program's goals. When Monica shared the news with James, his pride in her was evident. "You're building something bigger than yourself," he said. "You're giving people like me hope." His words stayed with her. She thought back to the day they first met, when she'd handed him that plate of food without knowing how much it would change both their lives. One evening, while Monica and James were serving meals at the center, they noticed a new face in the crowd. A young mother with 2 small children approached hesitantly, her exhaustion clear in her weary eyes. "Hi, I'm Monica," she said warmly. "Would you like something to eat?" The woman nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I didn't know where else to go." As they talked, Monica learned that the woman, Lisa, had recently lost her job and was struggling to make ends meet. It reminded Monica of her own recent hardships, and she felt a deep empathy for Lisa's situation. That night, After Lisa and her children had left, Monica turned to James. "This is why we're doing this," she said, her voice firm. "People like her shouldn't have to struggle alone." Over the next few weeks, Monica's outreach program gained traction. The food drives drew larger crowds, and local businesses began donating supplies and funds. Monica's initiative became a cornerstone of the community center's efforts, and her reputation as a leader grew. But not everyone was supportive. One afternoon, while Monica was unloading supplies at the community center, she overheard a group of people whispering nearby. "She's only doing this to make herself look good," one man said. "Yeah," another chimed in. "What does she know about running a program like this?" Monica felt a pang of hurt, but didn't let it show. She knew that skepticism was inevitable, especially in a community that had been let down before. Later, when she confided in James about what she'd heard, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You can't let a few voices drown out the good you're doing," he said. "Keep going. People will see the truth." His encouragement bolstered her resolve. She poured herself into the program, determined to prove that her intentions were genuine. By the end of the month, Monica's efforts culminated in a community dinner hosted at the center. Dozens of families attended, sharing stories, laughter, and hope over a warm meal. As Monica looked around the room, she felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. James approached her with a plate in hand, his expression soft. "Look at what you've done," he said. "This is more than a meal. This is a family." Monica nodded, her heart full. "And it's just the beginning," she said, her voice steady with determination. Unbeknownst to her, the dinner would mark the start of a larger movement. One that would challenge not only the biases of her former boss, but also the systemic barriers that had held her community back for so long. Monica's community outreach program continued to grow, gaining attention from local news outlets and community leaders. What started as a small initiative to redistribute leftover food had become a lifeline for dozens of families. Yet, the bigger the program grew, the more resistance Monica faced from those who sought to undermine her efforts. One morning, as Monica sipped her coffee at the catering office, Mr. Carter walked in with a newspaper in hand. "You've made the front page," he said with a smile, handing it to her. The headline read, "Former Waitress turned community leader sparks change." Below was a picture of Monica serving meals at the community center, her warm smile radiating from the page. "This is incredible," Monica said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I never thought something like this would happen." "You've earned it," Mr. Carter replied. "But with attention comes scrutiny. Stay prepared." True to his warning, the backlash was swift. A few days later, Monica received an unexpected visitor at the community center. To her surprise, it was her former boss, Mr. Hargrove. "Monica," he said, his tone laced with forced politeness. "I see you've been busy. What do you want, Mr. Hargrove?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. He smirked. "I came to congratulate you. It's not every day a waitress makes the news." Monica crossed her arms. "Is that all?" "Not quite," he said, his expression darkening. "You've been spreading lies about me and my business. I've heard people talking, saying I fired you unfairly." "You did," Monica said firmly. "And I won't apologize for speaking the truth." Hargrove leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Be careful, Monica. The higher you rise, the harder you'll fall." Monica refused to let his words shake her. "I'm not afraid of you," she said. "I'm doing what's right, and no amount of intimidation will stop me." Later that evening, Monica shared the encounter with James. "He's trying to scare me," she said, frustration evident in her tone. James frowned. "You can't let him get to you. People like him hate seeing someone they tried to tear down succeed." Monica nodded, but the encounter lingered in her mind. She knew Hargrove wouldn't stop at empty threats. The following week, Monica's fears were realized when she received a letter from a lawyer representing Hargrove's diner. The letter accused her of defamation and demanded a public apology. Monica's hands trembled as she read the letter aloud to Mr. Carter. "I can't believe this," she said. "He's trying to silence me." Mr. Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Let him try," he said. "You've got the truth on your side, and now you've got resources too. We'll fight this together." His words gave Monica the strength she needed. She contacted a lawyer and prepared to defend herself. In the meantime, she continued her work at the community center, refusing to let Hargrove's threats derail her mission. As the legal battle unfolded, Monica's story gained even more attention. Journalists began digging into Hargrove's past, uncovering a history of mistreatment and discrimination at his diner. Former employees came forward with their own stories, painting a damning picture of his business practices. The public outcry was immediate. Protests were organized outside the diner, and calls for a boycott spread across social media. Hargrove's attempt to silence Monica had backfired spectacularly, shining a spotlight on the very injustices he sought to hide. At the height of the controversy, Monica was invited to speak at a town hall meeting about her experiences. The room was packed, and as she stood at the podium, she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. But then she saw James sitting in the front row, his encouraging smile grounding her. She took a deep breath and began. "I'm here today because I believe in the power of community," she said. "I was fired for doing what I thought was right, feeding someone who was hungry. But that moment wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning." She went on to talk about the outreach program, the support she'd received from people like Mr. Carter, and the resilience of the community she served. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause. That night, as Monica walked home with James, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. "You were amazing up there," James said. "You're not just a leader. You're a voice for all of us." Monica smiled. "I'm just getting started." What Monica didn't yet realize was that her fight for justice had ignited a movement, one that would change not only her life but the lives of countless others. The weeks following Monica's town hall speech were a whirlwind of activity. Her outreach program received an influx of donations, and volunteers from across the city stepped in to help. The community center, once a quiet haven for a few families, became a bustling hub of activity. But with the success came mounting challenges. The lawsuit Hargrove had filed against Monica loomed like a dark cloud over her growing influence. While her lawyer assured her they had a solid defense, Monica couldn't help but feel the pressure. One evening, as she and James sorted through boxes of donated clothes at the center, Monica sighed. "I never wanted all this attention. I just wanted to help people." James placed a hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes doing the right thing makes you a target. But look around you, Monica. This is bigger than just you or Hargrove. You've started something no one can take away." She smiled weakly. "I just hope it's worth it." A few days later, Monica's court date arrived. The small courtroom was packed with reporters, supporters, and curious onlookers. As she took her seat, she caught a glimpse of Hargrove sitting smugly with his lawyer. The case revolved around Hargrove's claim that Monica's public statements about him and his diner were defamatory. Monica's lawyer, a sharp and eloquent woman named Rachel Porter, argued that Monica had merely spoken the truth about her experience. When Monica took the stand, she felt the weight of every eye in the room. She recounted the day she was fired, her voice steady despite the nerves threatening to overwhelm her. "I didn't think feeding someone in need was a crime," she said, her words resonating in the silent courtroom. Rachel asked her, "Why did you feel the need to speak out after you were fired?" Monica paused, choosing her words carefully, because staying silent would have meant accepting that what he did was okay. And it wasn't. Not for me. and not for anyone else he's mistreated. The trial stretched on for hours, with both sides presenting their arguments. By the time the judge announced a recess, Monica felt drained. James met her outside the courtroom, handing her a bottle of water. "You were incredible in there," he said. Monica shook her head. "I just hope it's enough." As the trial continued over the next few days, public support for Monica grew. People began protesting outside the courthouse, holding signs that read "Justice for Monica" and "No room for racism." The media coverage intensified, and Monica's story became a national conversation about standing up to injustice. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. Monica sat with Rachel, her hands clasped tightly together. The judge entered the room, and everyone rose to their feet. In the case of Hargrove versus Monica Johnson, the judge began, "The court finds in favor of the defendant." A wave of relief washed over Monica as the courtroom erupted into cheers. Hargrove stormed out, his face red with anger. Outside the courthouse, Monica was greeted by a crowd of supporters. Cameras flashed, and reporters shouted questions. But Monica only had eyes for James, who was waiting with open arms. "You did it," he exclaimed, pulling her into a hug. "We did it," Monica corrected, tears streaming down her face. That evening, Monica stood before a group of volunteers at the community center. "Today wasn't just a victory for me," she said. "It was a victory for everyone who's ever been told their voice doesn't matter. Together, we proved that standing up for what's right can make a difference." The room erupted into applause, and Monica felt a renewed sense of purpose. Hargrove's lawsuit had been a desperate attempt to silence her, but it had only amplified her message. As the night wound down, Monica found a quiet moment to reflect. She thought about how far she'd come, from a waitress fired for an act of kindness to a leader inspiring change in her community. James approached her, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Penny for your thoughts?" "I was just thinking about how one small act can spark something so much bigger," she said, taking a sip. "And it's only the beginning," James replied. Monica nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it head-on. Months passed, and Monica's life took on a rhythm she never expected. The community center had become an undeniable force in the city, offering food, shelter, education, and a safe place for people from all walks of life. What had started as a way to give back had turned into a movement, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark enormous change. Monica had become a local hero, though she remained humble, always shifting the spotlight back to the people she served. Her work was no longer just about feeding the hungry. It was about fighting for justice, equality, and creating a community where everyone, regardless of their background, could feel valued. One crisp morning, as Monica sat in her office sorting through some paperwork, her phone rang. It was Rachel, her lawyer. "I've got great news," Rachel said with excitement. "Hargrove is settling. He wants to avoid a public trial now that his reputation is in shambles. They're offering a substantial amount in damages." Monica listened, her mind racing. The settlement was significant, more than she had ever expected. But what really caught her attention was the mention of a public apology, a formal acknowledgement of the mistreatment she had suffered. It was a rare victory in a world where apologies were often withheld, especially when powerful people were involved. "I don't know if I need that," Monica said thoughtfully. "I'm not doing this for the money or the apology, but it would be nice to see him held accountable." "That's exactly why you should take it," Rachel urged. "This isn't just about you. It's about making sure others don't have to go through what you did." Monica agreed. "All right, let's do it." With the legal battle behind her, Monica focused more on the expansion of her outreach program. She had been approached by several organizations, each eager to partner with her in their mission to fight hunger and provide support for the homeless. Monica had never imagined her life would take this turn, but she knew this was where she was meant to be. One afternoon, while walking through the community center, she was greeted by an unexpected visitor, Hargrove. He stood awkwardly by the door, looking out of place in his expensive suit. His posture was stiff, but there was an unmistakable look of defeat in his eyes. "Monica," he began, clearing his throat. "I wanted to personally apologize. I didn't realize what I was doing when I fired you. I should have seen the bigger picture. You were right." Monica stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to respond. It wasn't often that someone like Hargrove admitted fault, let alone apologized. "I don't need your apology," Monica finally said, her voice steady. "But I'll accept it, and I'll make sure your apology means something, even if it's a little late." Hargrove nodded, his face flushed. He turned to leave, but hesitated. "You've changed a lot of lives, Monica. I just wanted you to know that." Monica watched him go, a sense of closure settling over her. He might have been trying to save face, but it didn't matter. The work she was doing spoke louder than anything he could say. Weeks later, Monica was invited to a large gala hosted by the mayor, honoring local heroes for their contributions to the community. Monica stood in front of a crowd of influential people, holding the award in her hand. The applause was deafening, but all she could think about were the faces of the people who depended on her and the work that still needed to be done. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath. "I'm honored to be here tonight, but this award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's been overlooked, for those who have been forgotten, and for those who continue to fight for justice. We're all in this together, and we all have a part to play." The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted into applause again. Monica smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. This wasn't just about her. It was about the community that had supported her, the people who had believed in her from the beginning. It was about the future she was helping to build, a future where no one was left behind. As the night wore on, she found herself reflecting on how far she had come. From the waitress with a kind heart to the leader of a movement, Monica had become a beacon of hope, showing that even in the face of adversity, one person could change everything. James found her later, standing by the window, gazing out at the city lights. "You've done it," he said softly. Monica turned to him, a smile spreading across her face. "We've done it," and with that, she knew that the journey wasn't over. It had only just begun.